past 2 years, American politics have been more divided than ever. Many Americans cannot see eye to eye. However, there is a growing number of Americans who identify less and less with either political party. The governor of New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham, has noticed this trend and acted on it. In 2025, she signed a bill opening up state primaries for voters, no matter the party affiliation, allowing the 26% of New Mexicans in her state with no party affiliation to vote freely. However, in many states such as Arizona and Missouri, voters will have the choice to choose a political party they don't feel represented or risk the choice of not voting at all. Today I will argue on why party primaries should be open to all voters. According to the Washington Post on April 21st, 2026, a growing share of voters say neither parties represent them. And with closed primaries, this often creates candidates who alienate voters voting in the general, essentially creating low voter turnout. In the general, a small number of partisan purists have control of those whose governors due to states growing and closing primaries. First, I'll discuss the following. Second, the cause, and third, the solution. The first type of problem. The first type of problem is unrepresentative candidates. According to Unite America on September 12, 2025, closed primaries who produce candidates who are on the more far end of the party spectrum, often being less unrepresentative of the general voter. For example, the 2024 General Senate Republican primary election produced a hardcore pro-life candidate in a state where views on abortion are moderate, leading to the defeat of that candidate in the general election. Another example, those primaries in Oregon produced a Democratic candidate in a congressional district that leans purple that is more progressive than the majority of the voters in that congressional district, leading to the defeat of that candidate. Additionally, closed primary voters who are a small chunk of the general population, just 7% of voters nationwide, tend to choose candidates who pass party purity tests and punish the ones who are willing to make bipartisan compromise. The second type of problem, lower voter turnout. According to NR Insight on November 27, 2024, primary elections on average get lower voter turnout than the general elections, but states with closed primaries get even lower turnout. For example, every 4 years during midterm primaries, states with closed primaries, 80% of eligible voters choose not to vote in the primaries. Now that I've discussed the problem, I'm now going to present the cause. First type of cause, state laws. According to CQ Researcher, February 6, 2026, independent voters are the largest growing voter demographic. However, there is a trend of state laws supporting closed primaries to protect partisan interests. For example, in 2023, during an ever-growing support for open primaries, the state of Wyoming closed down the primaries for only registered party members to vote in the primaries. If you look to the map, you see the map of the United States with closed primaries. Some states, such as Ohio and Texas, have tried to close down primaries. Additionally, Ohio attempted closing primaries with legislation bills, and Texas attempted to close primaries to state court. Second type of cause, state political parties. According to UCLA Anderson, on April 29, 2026, states' political parties who close primaries prefer keeping their primaries closed to protect their party beliefs and limit outside influence. For example, parties who close primaries will narrow down the turnout of more than 80% of voters who choose not to participate in the primary election to a small number of 20% who do vote. Another example, voters who do vote in closed primaries tend to be ideological. You look at the map, you can see how many states are all closed primaries. Closing down primary. Additionally, state parties in the primary states have pushed for many ways to close down their primaries, such as courts and bills. Arguments of opposing side. Common arguments of opposing side include the parties believe that parties have the right to choose to participate in the primaries. For example, many choose to believe that closing primaries ensures the winner of the primary is a follower of ideology. Another example, party peers believe closed primaries reward those that were active members in the party. Additionally, many believe that political parties are private organizations, so they do have a right who gets to vote, and they're conscious. Some refutes to that side include that this is a bad idea since the growing demographic of voters are identifying independent party members, which is 45%. For example, having a nominee who follows the hardcore stances of the political party will isolate and alienate voters for voting for one nominee. Another example, many Americans are choosing not to identify as members of the party, such as 45%. And additionally, primary elections are funded by public taxpayers, no matter the party. Not sure of the cause. I will now go on to discuss the solution. Action steps. The first type of solution action step is societal. Societal solution action steps include, according to the University of Chicago Center for Government on June 30, 2025, states who run primary elections can rewrite their laws to ensure primary elections are more open to voters and engage in voter turnout and higher than they usually are. For example, top two system states like Washington since 2008 and California since 2012 have this primary system. Another example, top two systems have all candidates, no matter the party, on the same primary ballot, allowing the top two of the ballot to advance in general election. Additionally, winners of the top two primary system are generally more moderate than candidates who are on the close primary contests, reflecting the general population of the state. The second type of action step you take is individual. According to Forbes, on January 26, 2026, as an American, you have the right to share your voice for primary reform. For example, you can show support for primary reform in polls such as the nearly 3 in 4 respondents in the January 2026 poll that agree that open primaries would lead to better candidates in the general election. Another example, you could also vote for primary reform in the ballot initiatives, such as ballot measures to either have open primaries or ranked choice voting. Today, I prove on why party primaries should be open to all voters. First, I spoke about the problem, second, the cause, and third, the solution. For the residents of New Mexico, the opening of political parties has allowed the residents to gain new voices on who governs them. No longer the days of being represented by people who do not share beliefs, but will now be represented by people who have more in common, with thanks to the opening up state political party primaries, allowing those who do not have a voice a new voice. Thank you.